Welcome to the Funded Now What podcast with your host, Andrew Lee Miller, brought to you by Growth Experts. You are in store for a chat about funding, marketing, startups, and all things growth.
All right. Hello and welcome back to the Funded Now What podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lee Miller, also known as Andrew Startups. I'm the founder and CEO of Growth Experts. We help early stage startups scale with growth and marketing help. I'm super excited because I've got an Australian startup, Australian, Taiwanese, Singaporean. There's some connections there. Wei-Chi is here. He's the founder and CEO of, is it Phnxx? I guess I should have asked you.
Yeah, Andrew, it's actually pronounced Phoenix.
Okay.
So
Even
the
better.
reasoning, so we come from a background doing mining oil and gas. So we used to do a lot of diesel systems and things. So the name Phoenix kind of also stems from the symbolic
That makes sense.
nature
That's
of
actually
what
a
we've
much
done.
more
Yeah.
realistic pronunciation. And before I get into what you guys do, because that's all amazing, I often have trouble with startups that just pick boring existing names. And you guys have a super unique spelling, and that's genius from the beginning. Because even though you might have difficulty with an idiot like me pronouncing it as Phnxx, it's brilliant because you'll own everything in Google. It's so easy to find you guys. You know, I work with startups that are calling themselves Affinity and stupid stuff that they don't Google first. And I had to give you credit on that. So how do you spell it and how can people find you before we go down the rabbit hole?
Cool. So yeah, it's spelled Phnxx. So our website's just phnxx.io.
Yep.
Yeah, and the unique spelling actually came from, I mean, we had decided on the name Phoenix to start off with, but as you may imagine, trying to find a domain that's spelled Phoenix the proper way, it was impossible. So we thought, well, how are the cool kids doing it nowadays?
But you probably have the .com also, because I doubt anyone has phnxx.com.
Yeah, we have looked at that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And it will pay dividends later on as you do get brand awareness and stuff. And then people don't misspell it like I did or mispronounce it. Then you own everything on Google. And so it's difficult in the beginning, easier later on. And that's the really genius thing there. But before we go any further, like I said, before we started recording, I reached out because you guys are a really cool project in cleantech. I'm going to try and give a little background info. You guys are grid in a box. We don't really say grid that much in America, but just literally imagine a shipping container full of foldable, unfoldable solar panels that can bring electricity to remote areas. That's literally the product, right?
Yeah, exactly. And our systems also come with batteries integrated and an energy management system. So essentially it's designed fundamentally to replace diesel generators. So if you imagine remote industries going anywhere from agriculture to mining, construction, remote communities, even things like events and festivals where typically the power source that everyone relies on is a diesel generator because it's something that's mobile, that's scalable. It can, be moved around as operations move. So, that's kind of the market that we're looking at.
Amazing. And, tons of stuff to talk about from there, but I immediately thought about the festival side. I went to Burning Man last year. It's this very, like new age hippie thing. And then you go there and everyone's using diesel generators and we're supposed to be for the planet and you have 60,000 generators at this party. It's horrible.
Yeah.
Actually you smell it. Like you literally are inhaling toxic fumes the entire time that you're there. Shout out to Burning Man. But I immediately thought about that because your website doesn't really represent that aspect, which I think focusing on the industries that you mentioned is amazing because those are the biggest polluters on the planet. And so, being able to take a chunk out of their footprint is like helping 10 million households improve their footprint. So I think that's an amazing place to start. But you might get more traction faster with the festivals. So that's cool. But walk us through the origin. Like this is not an easy company to start. It's like the ultimate hardware business. So how did you get there and what did you do before this?
Yeah, well, so myself and my two other co-founders, we've actually been working together for going on our tenth year now. So
Nice.
originally myself, so COO, and Ben, our current CTO, we actually started life working for Joel, our current CEO, at his
Okay.
previous business doing the modular fuel systems for mining oil and gas.
Wow.
So as you may be familiar, the environment in Australia is, mainly mining and construction, a lot of
Hmm.
remote work. So we did a lot of projects for mining companies, setting up remote fuel facilities for their operations.
Wow.
And back in 2019, we did this project for a company in Queensland, which is sort of far north Australia,
Hmm.
and the mine site was really remote. There's no road access, no air access. So everything has to come in on a barge on a 2 week journey. And
Wow.
so we designed a massive fuel facility for them, but the caveat to that is they didn't want to waste a drop of the diesel that they brought in for anything other than their mining fleet. So
Of
they asked
course.
us, hey, can you guys do a solar powered system that runs all the pumps, the lights, the controls, the comms, and everything?
Yeah.
And the catch to that is it has to come in a shipping container because those are the only things we can move to site.
Yeah.
So as part of that project, we designed a containerized solar and battery system that ran everything other than the
Wow.
fleet itself. And then off the back of that project, we thought, hey, this
This
might
might
actually
be a
be
fucking business.
exactly. This might be a great way to come in and replace diesel generators, right?
Oh
And
man.
so we actually pitched that idea to the original founders of that company that Joel was a part of, and they decided that no, they wanted to stick to bread and butter. So we made the decision to the three of us left the company and we started up Phnxx. So we are quite
Wow.
fortunate in sort of timing as well because so Engie, the French multinational energy
Hmm.
company, they run this program called Engie Factory, which is essentially like a venture build program where they scout for founders that have experience in industries that are complementary to what they're doing, but also working on things that they're not active in yet. So particularly for us, they were looking at for the Australian market in remote agriculture, mining, and those kinds of industries. So we went through the process. We got selected to go through their program, which was about a 4 month kind of venture studio type
Wow.
setup. And then at the end of that, we pitched to the NG board in France, and we got approved for funding. So that was kind of our pre-seed funding kicking us off.
Okay.
So off the back of
One
that, we
1.8
actually
million, right? I think I saw.
no, that was actually
Oh,
that
that was
was
before
back
that.
in yeah before that. So that was a measly 200 and
Oh, just a
250.
measly, yeah.
Yeah, but what that did was because we're quite seasoned in sort of execution, and we had already a supply chain built up to do containerized systems already. So within about 3 months of funding, we had already fully designed and tested a full scale system of what we wanted to do. So
Wow.
we used the funding to build that, what we called the pilot system, and then deployed that all over Australia. Well, primarily southeastern Australia
Hmm.
across various dairy farms. And yeah, now 20 months later, the full scale system is still floating around. We've abated close to 90 tons of CO2 over
Oh
this
my
period.
God.
And yeah, we've got three sales within agriculture, so primarily to dairy farms, also going into the construction industry right now as well,
Hmm.
and also a vertical farming operation in Singapore. So those are kind of our customer
Okay.
bases at the moment, but we're also looking at a lot of projects in remote communities, a lot of construction, even mining camps where, so it's essentially, on a mine site, everyone that works there typically stays in a camp for weeks at a time.
Right.
And that's all run on diesel. So got a lot in the pipeline,
Yeah.
towards, building towards replacing as much diesel as we can, but even edge of grid operations where, you might have unreliable, unstable grid power. So that's kind of where we can come in
Yeah.
and Yeah,
Man,
certainly.
everything you say just gives me 10 more questions that I want to ask you. So I'm going to try and I got to get to the marketing value eventually, but it's
Mm.
so interesting. First of all, what's the price point of the box, the Phnxx box, if you don't mind me calling it that?
No, no, that's yeah. The box concept is actually is kind of in our naming convention as
Yeah.
well. As far as price point goes, I'll go with sort of the what we call the standard configuration, which is the grid in a box, right? So that's 35 kilowatts of deployable bifacial solar with 125 kilowatt hour of battery storage, energy management system, and the likes.
Okay.
That's currently selling for around 110,000 USD here in
Okay. Thank
Australia.
you for doing USD. I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, we are actually in the process of entering the US market, so I've
Okay.
got my USD fairly
That
down
was
pat.
my next question, but all right.
Yeah. Yeah, and what that system does, if I put it into context, right? So over a 24-hour period, it generates around 200 kilowatt hours of usable energy. So that's between solar running the operations primarily during the day, but also charging the batteries for overnight use. So
Hmm.
200 kilowatt hours relative to let's say an urban environment is probably enough to power about 10 households of three
Wow.
people or four people. So,
Every day.
um, yeah, yeah. And what that means for a dairy farm is it's about a small, medium-sized dairy farm with around 200 to 250 cows. And so that system currently in Australia, if we're competing against very cheap grid price of around 20 cents per kilowatt hour, it equates to about a payback period of about 4 to 5 years. So fairly good payback for a big piece of hardware.
Okay.
We currently also so we've got a finance partner in a company called DLL, who are a division
That's
of
good.
Rabobank, and what they do is they finance the system for us in a structure that means that the farmer is actually never out of pocket at any point in time. So it's effectively what we're doing is taking what they're paying for power from grid or diesel and just shifting that to the monthly
Beautiful.
repayment on the system. And then after 7 or 10 years, they've paid the system off and they still have free energy for another 15, 20 years.
Oh my gosh. It's
Yeah.
almost it should be a no brainer, which is going to make the marketing and sales, I think, pretty easy. But
Yeah.
one thing I think we skipped over is the comparison and the context between the diesel. So you talked about the dairy farms, but for the remote place that's shipping their diesel on a barge for 2 weeks, which is insane. What's the
Yeah.
price comparison to that? Like how much? I'm sure that's way more costly than your setup, but I want to just hear it.
Yeah, yeah. So from an upfront capital perspective, it's diesel is cheaper in terms of you buy it's a diesel generator is cheaper, but
Of
the
course.
operating costs are significantly higher. So we are extremely competitive against diesel. If we're looking at markets like the US, Australia, even the Middle East or Europe, where the diesel typically costs around $1.50 to $2 per liter. It currently costs around 50 to 60 cents to generate a kilowatt hour of energy from diesel, whereas our system costs around 13 cents, so
Four
almost
times. Yeah.
4 to 5 times cheaper on an operating basis. So if we're competing against diesel, the payback period drops to around 2.5 years, which is yeah,
Amazing.
extremely attractive.
And then they don't have to deal with, there's also the cost of the barge as well. It's like 10 extra less shipments per year with a barge, which has an insane cost. And
Yeah,
then,
exactly. Yeah,
I mean, that's
and
hard to calculate, but I'm sure that's one of their major pain points. I loved on your website that you showed like a, picture of like a, electrical tower like falling over. I'm sure there's these emergencies that happen often that cause everything to come to a complete shutdown. You push one of those projects back another 2 weeks and it's millions of dollars lost. And I think that should definitely be also, we like to use fear in marketing to sell
yeah.
sometimes, and like that being able to never have a shutdown is your actual lever that should make someone. So you're going to save money and you never have a shutdown, but I'm sure you're already using that, but that was something that resonated with me and I've never even been on one of those sites before.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the other factors that take into consideration are like if you're running on diesel, obviously there's the logistical side of getting fuel to your site, right? So
Hmm.
so any interruption in that would obviously cause disruption in your operations
Yeah,
and everything. So so that's pretty unique.
very
The
cool.
power line analogy on our website is actually we had this freak weather event here in Australia.
It happens in Australia a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah, exactly. So this was back in February 2024, so just over a year ago. And so it's in this dairy area called Gippsland, and there was this massive storm that blew through, knocked down all the power lines. And that whole area was without power. But we actually had our pilot system on a dairy farm at that point in time, and they were the only property in the whole,
Oh my
area
God.
that had power. Ironically, the farmer who had the system actually uncoupled his backup diesel generator and borrowed that to his brother
Yeah.
10 miles
He
down the
didn't
road
even
because
need
he didn't
it.
need it. Yeah.
Dude, go over and make a video with that guy. That is the ultimate
Mm,
testimonial for any business owner. Like, we just had some really bad fires in LA, and there was like one
yeah.
house that employed their own private firefighter network. I mean, probably paid them like $1 million, but it's a $20 million
Yeah.
house or something. And they went like wildly viral on Reddit. And, I can just see that same thing. Like the one guy that had power in this emergency is because he had the foresight, you know, to not only is it cost effective, but they have to just be willing to change. And a lot of the industries that you target, they're just unwilling to adapt or change to anything new. They're like the last frontier of old school shit, not just in Australia, anywhere in the world. Like mining just works.
Yeah.
We don't need to innovate, and proving to them, even with all these numbers that make sense, sometimes is difficult because they're just like, third generation miners or something, and they're not necessarily, I don't know about Australia, but in America at least, the most like educated industry as far as like tech and stuff. So
Mm,
using that fear and showing them that this might happen to you, it could also really be a lever. Well, that's all really cool, but let's talk about your fundraising. So I think not the pre-seed, but your seed round, 1.8 million. I think I saw. Were you a part of
yeah.
that, like pitching investors, or was that all your CEO? Or let's talk about that.
Uh, yeah, so it was a joint effort from me and Joel.
Okay.
Yeah, so primarily on the Australian side, that was I guess from my end, just because I'm based primarily in Australia, where Joel
Right.
floats around between Singapore and China and Southeast Asia.
Wow.
Yeah, so but yeah, I mean, as far as that goes, I wouldn't say the journey was easy. Looking back on it, it's, but yeah, there were a lot of struggles during the initial 3, 4, 5 months where, I mean, we were literally just going and talking to I'd say the wrong people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the VC landscape in Australia is very software focused. So
Yeah.
trying to pitch them a capital intensive big piece of hardware, they're just like, we don't know how
Literally
to
the
do this.
biggest piece of hardware I've ever seen, pretty much for any. Yeah. Targeting is
Yeah,
really important. And I think that's something I have only had one startup ever on here say it was easy and they just got their
yeah,
check on the very first call by luck. But, so that's
yeah.
great. But how many different investors do you think you had to meet with to get your first check,
Ooh,
to put you on the spot?
I don't have my list ready, but
Yeah.
I'd say at least close to 30 conversations
That's not bad.
before
That's not
we
bad.
started getting traction. I think the good thing was that the ecosystem here is, because it's relatively small compared to the US.
Hmm.
So a lot of people help with introductions,
Hmm.
and we might talk to some investors, the really good ones, even though they pass. They will try, and if they see value in what you're doing, but it's just not within their mandate or something that they're not familiar with investing in, they'll always try and help point you in the right direction, or put you in touch with someone who could help.
Hmm.
Um, so eventually we got a lot of good advice from the rejections, to be honest. I mean, the first four months was brutal in terms of just, getting rejected left, right, and center. But um, the feedback we got was fairly valuable. So I touched on the financing aspect that we brought on. That was actually something that we're only planning to do this time after the fundraise, but because the feedback we got from investors is you need to be able to I guess reduce the friction to your fund
Totally.
customers as much as possible. And because the environment we're operating in, energy is typically seen as an operating cost. So
Right.
people are reluctant to put in a large capital investment towards energy. But if we can structure it in a way where it looks like to them it's just, they're just moving their monthly costs to some
Yeah.
other
It's a
form of,
no-brainer.
of OpEx. Yeah, so that is valuable. We got that, across the line, and then we just then continued the journey. And then we also found that, talking to investors who are more on the corporate side of things as well. So corporate investors or other, if we're looking at, let's say, investors who have a more long-term view. So
Mm.
the government is actually a good example in that sense. So the Victorian government, the state of Victoria, are one of our investors as well. So
Wow.
yeah, so they were, to be honest, a lot of people perceive, governments as like very rigid and unwilling to see change. But interestingly, the Victorian government, at least the startup investment arm, have been very forward thinking. So they actually supported us with some grant funding right in the beginning of the journey to help us with
Wow.
the cost involved to move the pilot and set that all up. And then, when we opened the seed round, we started conversations with them, and they eventually also joined the round as investors as well.
Amazing.
Um,
I
yeah, and then
love
on the other
that.
side,
I love that
yeah,
because I think people just think traditional venture capital is the only way to go, but a non-dilutive grant is really the best thing you can do in the beginning. And even more so, if you get a government stamp of approval, it actually excites investors and will bring more investors in because we're actually backed by a government. And on the government side, I mean, if this is a geographic area where they feel that this product can really help the businesses and the economy of their area, then obviously there's a massive win for them being an innovation center. A lot of government orgs really just care about, I mean, a lot of things, but the PR is the most important thing for them. Like, look, we're helping innovation. And, you touched on it. There isn't like 20 million companies trying to change the world from Australia. There's a lot. I've worked with several companies in Australia. I think it's an amazing startup scene, but, it's a tiny island in comparison geographically and, like on the startup scene. So doing something really badass, you can, that's a wedge to open the door with government because, there's not as much competition and noise as there is in another market. So I think that's really good advice. Um,
yeah.
how did you first get the government involved? Is that a cold email or a startup pitch event, or like, how does that start?
So that actually started with, again, I'd say the startup community as well. So, we originally started, with sort of a couple of desks in a co-working space. Um, like, I won't mention the name, but,
That's fine.
a WeWork type space.
Mm-hmm.
But we very quickly found it doesn't really cater well to startups, because they're just, all the different people that were sort of based there were, recruitment companies and
Mm-hmm.
accounting firms and law firms and things. And then we got introduced to the startup hub called Stone and Chalk, where they actually vet all the startups that come in terms of what they're doing,
Wow.
and whether or not it's a viable business and the likes. So we relocated here, and immediately just there were so many people who, because when we come into hub, we get like this bit of an introductory thing. It's like, oh, here's, we're Phnxx, is what we're doing. So everyone kind of understands, and then within a couple of days, a lot of the fellow founders were getting in touch. It's like, hey, we know this guy, or we know these
Love it.
people, and one of them put us in touch with the Victorian government arm, specifically looking at ag tech, because they'd heard that our first, customers are kind of looking
The
are in the
dairy.
dairy space, and then they put us in touch with the Victorian government startup arm that were helping
Love
with
it.
grants and things, and then so that's kind of where that relationship
Yeah, just people
blossomed
helping
from.
people. Well, I hope to be a
Yeah.
catalyst for that for you guys entering the United States. I mean, I think at the end of the day, everybody wants to help improve the world. Like I've never worked with a cigarette company or alcohol or anything. In 20 years of doing
Yeah.
marketing, I've had opportunities thrown at me and I'm like, no, not worth it. I don't care about it. So I think if people can just make a simple intro and then feel good at the end of the night about helping remove 90 tons of diesel fumes or whatever you said earlier out of the environment, and that's definitely a thing you want to play on. I mean, I can do good by just helping you, and that's going to 10x my impact, and so I think that's part of the reason why people want to introduce you to others, because you guys are doing really the Lord's work, as we say, But uh, so let's talk about that US launch. I think that's definitely something I can hone in on, creating some value for you on this call. Your branding is good. The website's pretty good. I don't need to go too far in there. I mean, you do have a hard, heavy video that plays, which is not really good for Google and SEO, but Google and SEO is not a really big deal when you're like such an innovative company. People aren't going to go like, what's an off-grid? So, it just doesn't exist. You're creating a new market. So that doesn't really matter. I think
Yeah.
the main thing is there's two main things that really matter for this company, which is getting leads with potential customers and then promotion. There should be a lot of promotion happening. And I kind of harp on this a lot with like B2B companies, because we think so much about leads and hire salespeople, but we don't realize that you get really solid PR and then people find you, and the sales cycle is so low, short, because they're already sold, because the validation of seeing you in like Dairy Farm Times magazine or whatever it is really, makes them think I got to work with these people. So the difference in the client coming to you versus you reaching out is really amazing. But then also, when you do that outreach to customers, you are able to share, hey, by the way, we were, nominated by Dairy Farms Time as the most innovative company in the year. I just made it up. But so that's usually where I like to focus on. But when does this launch in the US and how's that going?
So we're looking at a bit of a soft launch. So we have already signed an agreement with a partner in the US.
Okay.
So they are actually responsible for a fairly large chunk of utility solar installations across the US already. I'd say close to
Well,
10% of all solar
wow.
on a utility scale have been done by that entity. So um, that kind of also links back to, I guess, the second part of our investment is that we started looking for sort of more corporate orientated investors that kind of saw synergies, but also opportunity and alignment. We kind of pitch ourselves as going after what we call the missing middle, which is essentially if you're looking at, there's rooftop solar across all houses, office buildings, and then the next step up is really massive gigawatt scale solar farms. But no one's
Hmm.
really looking at that middle space where you
Hmm.
have people, as we touched on, agriculture, mining, remote construction, events and festivals where they can't move away from diesel generators. And a lot of sort of the corporate side of companies that we speak to see that gap, but because they're either already too large and too sort of entrenched in what they're doing to be able to pivot economically to do that, and
Hmm.
that's kind of where we have been doing well. So one of our larger investors in this round as well as an ASX listed company called Cinetech. So they do very high end critical control systems for utilities, and
Okay.
they identified that gap in the market where we're currently targeting, but because their expertise is in software controls and very sort of high end critical systems, they it was too much for them to be able to pivot or redivert resources towards that.
Okay.
So they saw an investment in us as a strategic alignment. So
Of course.
so in the US as well. So that partnership for us is it's sort of twofold. One is actually they have a complementary system that can pair well with our
Okay.
systems in the industries they're looking at. But then the other side of it is because we don't want to sort of stretch ourselves too thin in terms of the core team and our resources. So outside of
Smart.
Australia, we're primarily relying on partnerships and
Partners.
distributors,
Love it.
right, to help push the
Yeah, I mean,
systems forward.
open the
So
doors, like you're going to fail a lot less when you start with partnerships. I often see that you go to market through partnerships, and then the revenue from that can help you build out a team and go direct to consumers or customers. But I do think there's still a reason to focus on getting your own PR. I mean, just the events industry itself. Think about it. If you are doing Glastonbury in the UK or Coachella in the US, and you have the opportunity to become the first like green festival or the first like renewable energy powered, non-diesel powered festival. I mean, the PR is just global. Like we're talking in the millions of dollars in PR for them. Um, and maybe the first year it's not like the whole festival, it's just one stage, but it's like even that is a real, Coachella makes an effort to remove 90 tons of diesel fumes out of, the customer base in California that pays $10,000 to go to that festival is going to be like, fuck yeah, that's awesome. I'm going to go to Coachella this year. So I think that doing PR on your own really, really makes sense. You don't need an agency for that. ChatGPT with a little bit of marketing juice over top of it and rewriting it can make a pretty good press release these days. It's just blood, sweat, and tears and time investment after that. Like reaching out to, every industry that you want to target has its own niche media. Niche media is my own term that I just call it, but it's like, the event industry probably has 20 major publications. How long could it take to reach out to 20 publications with, hey, we've got this really exciting technology that, and we're already going to market with these partners, but we would, love to give you the exclusive story about how these events are going to become, carbon neutral and green, et cetera. And then the people who are the decision makers at those events and those dairy farms and those mining operations, they read that niche media. And it could be podcasts like this. Sorry that your customers are probably not listening to this podcast, but your next round of investment will come from someone listening to this probably. But you hone in on the media sources that your customers might listen to. And that's that can be as little as a 10-minute per day time investment for founders. Probably a little bit more to really get a good result out of it. But when you're like so niche like this, like I said, it's pretty small, the amount of media companies that are targeted on like event producers. And then it's, we have a big festival in San Francisco called Outside Lands, and it's just locally owned. It's like 250,000 people, maybe more in a weekend. It's amazing.
Oh,
Like
wow.
all the biggest acts in the world go there. I don't know who's headlining it this year, maybe like Tyler, the Creator or something like that. But I think it was Green Day last year, but that's just a regular guy that's just like lives in Berkeley and, that owns the festival. And I know because my friend runs the daycare that his kids go to or something, but those people are very approachable on LinkedIn also in Australia too, but maybe not so as much in the mining industry and dairy farming, but shooting messages on LinkedIn to these people like, hey, we'd love to give you the opportunity to be the first festival in the United States that's not diesel powered. That's like a one-line thing. Like, what? Okay, I'll take that call. At the end of the day, what is a big opportunity for them? They know that's a problem. I am a very sensitive. I have a very sensitive sense of smell. So Burning Man was like I had to have my face covered up the whole time, and honestly, it's like really hypocritical. Like that's 60,000 people that are camping for a week. So every single person has a diesel generator. I did no electricity, no connection to the internet, no phone, nothing, no heated up, no refrigerated food the whole week because like I can camp, but most people do. And so I think Burning Man also would be really interested in, they're like getting a lot of flack. I don't need to go super deep on it, but they had like some Trumper people on the board and they're getting a lot of flack from the really, really conscious event goers that they have. And so this would be a huge opportunity for them to get good PR. And a lot of like product and engineering focused founders don't realize how you can fit in there for that. And like, yes, they're going to save some money, but they really just care about the good PR. And, I consulted on a company that was like a wellness focused thing for employees. And we found that that was the lever that got companies to invest tens of thousands of dollars in employee wellness. Like, are you guys going to help us with a press release that we can show externally that we care so much about our employees? So understanding that will really help. I think the partnerships is a great thing, but you have a great brand name, a great mission. A lot of people want to get behind you, myself included. And so there's no reason not to do a big PR effort as a company, like even globally. Like, you'll find random markets where people want to pay in advance to get your product there because nothing like that exists. I mean, have you thought about like front lines in war-torn areas as well?
Yeah. Thanks for touching on that, Andrew, and
Yeah, for sure.
great advice on the events and festival side. So part of what we're trying to do is in this stage now is to activate the rental side of things. So because of the capital nature of
Of
what we
course.
do, to be able to do rentals, we need to be able to either partner with a rental company, like let's say United Rentals as an example,
Hmm.
who would probably be one of the suppliers for the many diesel generators out there, to take on our systems as part of their offerings,
Hmm.
or the alternative is either is to fund our own fleet of systems that we can rent out.
Hmm.
But to be able to do that, we need to obviously set up a capital base to do so. The strategy we currently are looking at is what is kind of like a special purpose vehicle or an SPV fund.
Hmm.
That is essentially so kind of looking at two avenues of investment moving forward, which is one, the equity investment into the company itself. But the other side is actually sort of a debt financing or investment into the SPV, and the SPV then owns these assets and leases them out and generates ongoing revenue for the investors in that fund. Um,
Makes
the
sense.
numbers look very good. I mean,
I can
we're
imagine.
looking at about a 20 at least a 20% IRR on that
Month
fund
on month.
for
Nice.
month on month, and that's still assuming a relatively modest sort of 65 to 70% utilization rate of the
Okay.
assets. So that's kind of the next thing that we're working on at the moment. And it's a massive piece for us because, as you said, there's so many, very short-term rentals
Exactly. Temporary
out there.
customers.
Yeah. So,
Do,
so
so,
yeah, so to be able to do that is something
it'll
that is top of
10x the
mind.
market size. Absolutely. Maybe 100x.
Mm.
And I mean, because of the portability, I could see it's mind boggling how large the things are that people bring into Burning Man. So it might sound ridiculous but there's 400, 500 person camps that are run on diesel.
Yeah,
And so a 500-person
yeah,
camp, each person's paying like at least $500, $1,000 a person. And they're doing like these massive structures. So it's not crazy to think that they would want to spend an extra, 5K, 10K to have this non-diesel, out of the box grid thing. That's really cool. I should have said this in the beginning, but I was just so blown away with all the things you're saying. I should have asked this. Do you have any patents on the product, or is there a moat around the technology or is it like easily copyable?
yeah. No, that's a great question, Andrew. Yeah, so our system is actually is protected by a patent at the moment. So the
Patent,
patent
sorry,
extend.
patent.
Yeah. Yeah, patent pet. It extends to essentially the system as a whole, but then also down to the mechanisms by which the solar panels can deploy and also angle adjust as well. Even the integration and operating philosophy behind how the solar system, the battery, and the energy management system controls
Okay.
the operation of the system. We also, as part of the patent, have a wind module that's in there. But that's something that we're still sort of investigating in terms of how
Hmm.
viable it is, and where to start looking at that, but we thought we'd focus on, essentially tried and tested technology in terms of,
Of
we
course.
all know how solar works, we all know how batteries work. So, packaging that in a form factor that allows for, mobility and scalability quite easily is what we
Is
focus on
paramount,
at
of
this point
course.
in time. Yeah.
Okay, that brings me to another question. I don't know if we'll ever get off this call, actually, Wei-Chi, but with all this unique technology, do you have to provide training and even like tech support to the customers as well? Like that remote mind, do they have to have a Phnxx employee that's on site at all times for any breakdowns, or how does that work?
No, that's a great question. So we actually designed the system, and part of what we trialed over 20 odd months with the pilot system was how easy is it to deploy on site and set up, right? So for the first five deployment or first five times we deployed it, packed it up, deployed it, packed it up, it was always me and one other person. So sometimes me and Ben, sometimes me and one of our engineers. And part of that was, we needed to iron out all the kinks to make sure,
Of
it's
course.
smooth every time. But the other one is just to prove how easy it is for someone to do. Because I mean, it's, two, startup guys, based in the office,
You're pretty
and,
buff, bro. You're pretty buff. It might be. No, I was kidding.
no, thank you, Andrew. But yeah, so the photo you see there with the tractor, that
Hmm.
was actually the very first time we deployed it, and this was on
Wow.
that dairy farm. So the person driving that tractor was me, and so literally, right, we got to site and we asked the farm because initially he agreed to help us with the tractor, but then he had a bit of a leg injury, so he couldn't drive the tractor, and then he's like, well, I'm happy for you to drive it if you're comfortable. I'm like, okay, but I don't know how to drive a tractor. And then
Oh my
he gave
God.
me a 10-minute crash course on how to drive a tractor, and then off we went and deployed the
That,
system. So it's really as easy as that. And the
wow.
training we provide is basically just on, how a couple of steps when you deploy the system, make sure that the pins are in place, that, so the angles are fixed, the order of doing things. But everything else is very straightforward and simple. And then maintenance wise, it's actually much easier to maintain than let's say a rooftop mounted solar system, because the typical maintenance is basically just cleaning the panels, checking the
Mm,
wiring, and all that. So having everything on the ground makes it
makes
a
it.
lot easier to maintain.
Hmm.
And because we have that built-in energy management system, we can actually monitor the performance of the system on a continuous basis. So we'll know if there's a fault in a string of solar panels or in one of the battery cells, and we can take care of that. But typically day-to-day maintenance is just performed by whoever is running or owning the system.
Makes sense, and that's awesome for you guys because you don't have to stay labor intense, a massive team. But there's probably a revenue opportunity to like have a subscription model there, so that you're constantly monitoring it with software, and then you attack problems and issues before they even have to become a massive thing. Like, have you thought about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, well, no, thanks for bringing that up. I mean, it's great to see you're making all the connections.
Yeah,
Our ultimate vision is what we call energy as a service,
right.
and that encompasses not just the hardware side of things, but the software side where we can monitor, but also using AI and machine learning and analytics to essentially optimize performance of systems
Hmm.
on various sites. So just as an example, during the pilot phase, we had the system on a dairy farm that only heats their hot water at night. So dairy farms use massive amounts of hot water every day because they have to wash down
Clean.
the clean the barns once the cows are milked, and then also wash out the milk fats every time it's emptied when the truck comes to pick up the milk and all that. So they go through massive amounts of hot water, and they're heating from basically, room temperature as it comes in from the taps,
Yeah.
up to just below boiling point, right? So
Hmm.
they heat their hot water at night because we have off peak rates here in Australia. So between 7 p.m. and 5 a.m., their electricity costs are about,
Way
40%
less.
lower.
Wow.
But it's very inefficient because they're heating a huge volume of water from room temperature up to boiling every single night. So we told them, well, look, you're heating water for free now. Let's switch the system to just operate
Daytime.
like a normal household, geyser system where it just
Right away when
every
they
time,
need it.
yeah, right away when they need it, so just heating up bits at a time and maintaining a temperature. And just from making that switch, they reduced the amount of energy required to heat hot water over a day by about 25%.
Man.
So part of the energy as a service aspect is once we have larger corporate customers that have multiple systems, we provide them with that insight towards, hey, you've got similar operations on site A, B, C, but site C seems to be using a lot more energy for some reason. From what we've seen in the energy curves, you're getting these spikes during this time of day. What's happening there?
Wow.
So help them improve their operations. And then the second aspect of that is the service and maintenance side. So rather than fixed service schedules, or only servicing or maintaining something when something goes wrong, we can essentially monitor and service as needed as a preventative measure as opposed to a reactive measure. And
So
then
cool.
last side of it is the financing, right? So outside of just direct sales, there's the finance aspect where it's essentially a lease to own, but then ultimately the rental side. So essentially catering for
Everyone.
types of customers, everyone
Yeah.
essentially as far as possible. So that's kind of what we call the energy as a service.
I love it. And I think going back to the thing you said about the dairy farm not having to heat it up at night, that's another massive PR opportunity. I mean, not just for the niche dairy media, it's for whatever city that is that those farms are in. Like, that's why Victoria is so interested in working with you. It's like, if we have a lot of industries in certain places that are affected and you can help these families eat, it's literally putting food on the table for like the original small business owner, and so, the farmer. So yeah, can't overlook how valuable PR is going to be for you guys. You should start now and you should really put serious time into it because I'm a marketing guy and I'm like blown away by what you're doing. So like every person that understands the impact there is going to want to talk about you. And so I was a little marketing light on this show. That's just because what you guys are doing is so cool. And I wanted to give you the floor to really talk about how you're going to change the world. And, man, I'm just really excited to see what you guys do with this launch in the US. And I hope we get to keep in touch. And Wei-Chi, it was so great for you to be here. And thank you so much for making the time.
No, thank you, Andrew. Thank you for reaching out, and yeah, it was really a pleasure chatting to you. I mean, it's great when someone really understands what we're doing and just makes the links to all these industries.
That's my job, though. I don't want to flatter you too much. Like I often work with high tech engineers that have built incredible products that are not good at marketing them and don't know how to talk about them and the messaging behind it. And one of my superpowers is being able to quickly understand something and put it into lay people's terms and make it like a marketing opportunity. But what you guys are doing is really badass. I had to keep the F-bombs to a minimum on this call just because I'm like, fuck, that's so cool. But I don't want to get like dinged by Apple and not get shown to under 18 people because I say the F word too much. But it's really fucking cool what you guys are working on. And I am really excited to see this deployed. And I can see so many applications where this is going to help a lot of people. So don't give up and keep going. And thanks again for being here, brother.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you so much for the time today. And it was a pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely.
That has been another episode of the Funded Now What podcast with your host, Andrew Lee Miller, brought to you by Growth Experts. If you liked the episode, please subscribe. And if you really liked it, please share with other founders and entrepreneurs. Thanks, and we'll see you in the next episode.